Hello and welcome to Together We Connect. I am so excited for today's session. First of all, Vicki, who is our guest, is all the way from Sydney, and thank you for joining us, especially after a long week, as it's Friday afternoon in Sydney for you. So guys, I know Vicki on a personal level. I met Vicki when I was 7 years old. She was my speech and language pathologist. Have I got that right?
Yeah, speech therapist in the UK, we would have said, but now I'm in Australia, so it's pathologist, but it's the same.
Okay. So Vicki is someone who's very special and very close to my heart. Because without the key foundations of learning how to read, write and spell, you can't get anywhere really in life. So throughout this talk, we're going to see how Vicki started her fabulous clinic, which you can see in the background, and how it empowers children, and especially children that find it hard and difficult to read, write and spell. And Vicki shows that, hey, reading and writing and spelling doesn't have to be boring. So watch out for the fabulous tips. Vicki, over to you.
Oh, well, thank you for that very lovely introduction. Yes, we do go back a very long way, and it's always a pleasure to work with a child, and very unusual to see them again when they're an adult. But yes, I do have a long career. So I've been a speech pathologist for nearly 32 years this year, and have spent about half of that time in England and about half of that time in Australia in my career, and have worked with all sorts of different cohorts, mainly children, but I did quite a big stint in my early career with adults. Oh, sorry. Don't know how we get rid of those noises. I thought I might just play a little introduction for about a minute and a half, because this was a video that was made just to summarize, I suppose, a little bit about the clinic, and that might help people that are watching understand the background. So is that okay to do?
Go for it, Vicki.
Okay, I will share my screen. Go and pop that on.
I'm Vicki. I've been a paediatric speech and language therapist for 30 years, specialising in literacy for the last 20. I've dedicated my life to helping children overcome speech, language and literacy difficulties in my clinics both in London and in Sydney, as well as around the world, online and for charity. Lots of people ask me how I managed to run a full-time busy clinic, train staff and still have the energy to develop in-depth literacy programs. They also wonder how and when I was able to create a comprehensive set of training materials that I donated and taught to Cambodian teachers and children during my holidays. The short answer is both sad and wonderful. My husband and I were unable to have children of our own, and after a long, sad journey of infertility, we decided to invest the energy and time that we would have spent with our own kids by helping other people's children flourish instead. We chose to get creative, switch off the TV, and spend our evenings and most weekends designing and developing the Language Tree's system of beautiful teaching resources. As my husband once pointed out, we filled the space in our hearts by positively impacting the lives of thousands of children and their parents by giving them the gift of reading. These are a few of my happy places. In my clinic, surrounded by our godchildren, with my niece and the children that we mentor, and those that we've taught from some of the poorest villages in Cambodia. Click on.
I think that's it. Back to you, Tova.
Wow. I've watched it a few times, the video, but every time I see it, I see new things every time that pop in my mind, and that video from beginning to end is quite a story. And this time what came to the top of my head was that you and your husband are literally inspirations for the education world. You guys both went through something quite difficult, and you kind of spun it around. And I'm sure over the years it was quite painful, but it's so beautiful and empowering to see how you've used those 32 years and probably even more, literally to dedicate your life to helping children achieve the most important skill. So we saw a little bit on the video about how your clinic started and your passion for children, but could you tell us in your own words, like, how did your clinic become so successful, and what was your driven passion to help children?
Oh, that's a big question. So I think naturally I always loved children, even when I was a child. So from about the age of 4, I used to think that I was a mum, and I would always collect up any baby that was hanging around, really, and had a little entourage that used to follow me around. And then I used to look after my cousin and then the children in junior school. And when I was 14, my dad, who was a dentist orthodontist, he mentioned that there was a speech therapist in his hospital where he worked, and would I like to go and observe? And so that's what started it for me, really, age 14. And it sort of tapped into my sense of curiosity and medicine and that playfulness and fun and helping others. And I suppose it really just brought together all of those areas that were quite natural for me, and I was able to extend upon those. And so that's kind of what got me started. And then I was able to design all my studies towards that, and then obviously go to university and get my degree. And then I worked for the NHS. And then after 10 years of working in the National Health Service, I set up my first private clinic. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but certainly it's always been very natural and very much a love of mine to communicate and to be with people, and particularly children.
It's amazing how young we observe things, and we take on and see the world and see that's what I want to become. So maybe please will inspire other speech and language pathologists or speech therapists in today's talk. Vicki, before we get into talking about your clinic more, as adults, we need to communicate daily. What situations can you tell us about where it is vital to have excellent communication skills, both spoken and written, and how the lack of these skills can affect confidence?
Oh my goodness, that's a huge question. Okay, so I think in most situations we need to communicate, and the most obvious form of communication is speaking. And communication is really a two-way street. So there's reciprocity. So one person talks, the other one listens and hopefully processes what they're saying, and vice versa. And you need that from every situation, from social, vocational, functional. It's just a vital skill. And many people, I think 1 in 7 have a communication difficulty at some point in their life. So, you know, the obvious skill is speaking and listening and comprehending, and then that filters down to literacy, which is basically the written form of spoken language.
Because things can, especially like with WhatsApp today, like text messages can go so badly wrong, especially my dyslexia. We have had quite funny moments, you know, with like different words spelled wrong. Like I always spell the word Beyonce and finance wrong. So in a conversation, you kind of imagine that can look a bit odd.
I know. I remember my mum writing smoked salmon bagels, and it came out as smoked salmon Nigels. So yeah, that's fun though. But yes, I think even just in regular communication, things can go wrong. So we call that topic maintenance, where we're able to continue a conversation, and then we have communication breakdown, where we're not quite sure what to say and how we repair that conversation. Yeah, it's a huge area. And as speech pathologists, we're always on the lookout for all types of different difficulties that might arise that we need to help with.
Right. I guess brings us a bit to our next question about how do you connect, engage with children? Because I'm sure they're quite young and they might be a bit shy in the beginning.
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the clinic, basically I say to the parents when they phone up, you know, it's a bit like a toy shop in here, and we try and have different activities and toys that would engage all manner of ages and genders. And, you know, if we don't have something, I'll say to a parent, if they have a particular interest, they can bring their toys that they really love to the clinic so that they feel settled. I've also, just going back to the question of success, I think keeping the clinic quite small, not kind of over expanding, and keeping it very personal is something that leads to success, because when they phone, they'll always speak to me or one of my staff members. You know, it won't ever be a sort of recorded message or anything like that. They'll always be able to have that point of contact.
Well,
And so,
it's quite beautiful. It has that family touch to it, that closeness.
Yeah, and I've always run my clinics in my houses, so I've always constructed them very carefully so that they're separate from where we live. So we have 2 front doors, for example, but the children feel very at home. And the first thing I do when a child arrives is I show them around the clinic. And so we have an outdoor space here, and we have a trampoline, and a lot of children, you know, love to move or love to play when they're learning. And I don't think it has to be a sit down, here's a worksheet. In fact, I really steer away from that. So it's always about tapping into where they're at, where their interests are. That's part of the conversation we have with the parent, so that immediately I know how to set it up. And then I
remember my first day coming to you, and the first thing I played with was a house, a doll house.
I remember this.
But great, this is fun, much better than school. I'm not going back there, you know.
And I don't know if you remember what you said, but I'll never forget it, because I always remember I've worked with over 4,000 children, but some of them really stand out. And what you said really stood out. And you said, can I play with your terraced house or semi-detached house? And it was like a doll's house that had 3 kind of separate pieces that were placed together. And that always made me giggle. I thought, wow, she's got great language.
The little I had. Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't have the lid on my mouth always. Even so I hope that I wasn't a challenging child, but I'm sure you've come across some very difficult situations. Is there anything you can share with us?
Well, there's many difficult situations, but I think patience is really important. Listening is absolutely key, and tapping into where that child is at, meeting them where they're at. So I'll give you 2 specific situations. One was very extreme, was a little boy who had severe autism spectrum disorder. And when he first came to the clinic, I could see that he was very distressed and sort of banging his head. And I said to his mum, I don't think this is going to work. How about I come to your house? And so I came to her house, because sometimes we'll do home visits. And he was more comfortable, obviously, in his own house, but he still wouldn't let me go anywhere near him. And it was a fascinating story. And this is where the patience and the observing and the listening came in. And he couldn't speak at all. He just had noises, and he was about 3. And so I started at the top of their stairs, and every week I'd move closer and closer down the stairs and sort of across the hallway, and he was in the lounge. And he would let me get closer and closer as the weeks wore on. And eventually I was inside the lounge. And so at that point, he was running up and down the lounge to the dining room. It was quite an open space. And so I said to his mum, you know, let's try something that might really work. And I'd had some success with this before with other children and their language. So I asked her to just sort of hold him gently around the waist, but facing me, and to say, ready, steady, go. And on go, to just release her hands and give him a little gentle movement forwards. And she did. And he ran straight to me, and I caught him. And it was the first time I touched him or he'd been near me. It was very emotional. And I could see her welling up. And I sort of gently turned him around to face her. And I said, ready, steady, go. And on go, I let him go. And then what happened with the language that was so crucial was I asked the mum, next time, you know, after a few goes, say ready, steady, but don't say go. Just hold him a little bit more firmly, and then wait till he turns around and looks at you, and then say go. And so she waited, and that happened. And as he turned and he looked up at her, she said, go, and let him go. And that was a key moment, because he realized when there's a word, it means something. Something has to happen. And that's the language. And so then he came to me and we did it. And then eventually I didn't say go. I said ready, steady. And I changed my voice and my intonation. And he looked up at me and he said, "Ah." I was like, "That's go." That's his version of go. And off he went. And then we refined that. And then we did it for ready, steady, tickle, ready, steady, swing. We had him on a swing. And so those were his first words, swing and go and tickle. And from there, he trusted me and he was able to build up. So that was one for sort of really severe communication and language. And he was in a special unit, and eventually we got him into mainstream school. And I also taught him my literacy method, and he's able to read and write now. So that was super successful. Yeah, and then another little girl I remember distinctly, she would not write at all. And she also came, and so we have to be quite inventive. And I went through a lot of shaving foam. So I got a tray and I sprayed the tray with shaving foam, and she loved putting her finger into the shaving foam and forming the letter shapes. So I was still able to teach her to spell. Her mum sat beside her and wrote the words that I was teaching her. So she had to work out the sound cards. We use a system of sound cards, which are like phonic cards, which you'll probably remember.
Hours every morning. I wanted to catch my mom.
Yeah, it takes what, 5 to 10 minutes, I promise. 5 to 10 minutes probably felt like hours, but it should only be 5 to 10 minutes. And and so once she could spell the words in shaving foam, her mum would write them so she could still see them and rehearse them that night. And that took about a year before she'd pick up a pencil. And I had to have a gap after her lesson before the next child would come in, because I'd have to rinse the shaving foam outside with colours. It was hilarious. I think her mum bought me packs of shaving foam as Christmas presents. So it's about being inventive.
Wow, so all the educators out there, forget pen and pencil. When you teach children, you've got to start off with shaving cream. You've got to make sure, like, just how you have like stacks of toilet paper probably in the school's storage, you've got to start with the shaving foam, and let's see what parents have to say about that one. I think that's great. Hey?
Fairly atypical, but yeah, it's about being creative.
And I love that. That's what education is about. It's about like pushing the boundaries, like getting out there. Speaking about tools and things like that, was there any pivotal moment in your career that made you look at things or do things differently?
That's a good question. I think the biggest moment for me was when I was working in the NHS, the National Health Service in England, in London, and we had huge waiting lists that we had to meet particular criteria and certain time frames. And so 2 colleagues and we decided that we would set up workshops for parents. And that way we could train the parents to do the early part of the therapy that were quite sort of simple first stages of the therapy. And so we designed a workshop around training the parents. And the idea was that they would work with their child at home. We gave them very specific structures. And then when the child's name came to the top of the waiting list, some of that early work had been done for us. And what actually happened was the children spontaneously improved, and about half of them didn't even need therapy at all. So the parents had effectively done it themselves with our training. And so we ended up writing this up, and then it caught the attention of a publication house. So there was a publication called Winslow Press, which is now called Speechmark, and they do educational and particularly speech pathology resources. And so we got a publication contract to write up. And that was a really pivotal moment to actually produce a book, a treatment manual, and it had home programs for parents and these workshops and particular sort of outcome measures. So it was really exciting to actually write a book with 2 friends and colleagues. And that made me realize, I think the pivotal part there was the power of the parent. A parent, nobody is as invested in their child as a parent. And so if you can work very gently with a parent, and basically my saying is, I'll teach you to be me when I'm not there. So I always have a parent present in the clinic with me, and they're always learning the methods alongside their child. It's very much a 3-way process. And then they can continue that good work.
it's quite interesting because sometimes some specialists want the parents as far away as far as much as possible because they can get involved. So how do you stop maybe a parent, like, because sometimes a parent can be full of their own ideas, and how do you quieten that down, because especially the way your strategy works is different?
I know, and that is so interesting because, you know, you need to respect where people are at, and you need to respect the way that people interact with their children and even discipline their children. So sometimes I will say to the parent, you know, you just sit back and relax. That's usually my strategy. You just sit back and relax, and, you know, this is your time to just watch and observe, and, you know, I'll have a go, and if I need you, I'll really involve you. And then when I'm teaching the strategy, the ones who know me really well, they're like, oh, I'm saying too much, sorry, you know, and it's quite funny, but often I'll need them in there. So it's just about gently respecting people. And, you know, that's come with years of maturity. I'm old now, so, you know, I feel like I've generally got a handle on it. Sometimes there'll be one that will surprise me or frighten me, or, you know, but usually they're here for a reason, and they've usually come pretty highly recommended, so that tends to be what I hear. So, you know, it works out quite well.
No, that's a fabulous strategy. With your video, we saw a snippet of your charity work, and really special. So I can see, like, over the years, it's been truly inspirational, and it really highlights your passion for teaching children. Can you please share with us your connection to the various charities and how this connection has developed over the years?
Yeah, so I've been involved with 3 charities. So one was called Adopt a Grandparent, and I wrote some speech therapy games that grandparents could play with their children. So the idea is that you're playing but with a purpose, so that you're educating as you're playing. So it was really lovely. And then the biggest one that I was involved with was a Cambodian charity, and we wrote a speech and spelling and English and literacy massive project. It took 6 years, and we delivered it to very remote communities. So these were children who, had not really ever seen a paper and pen before, or, you know, had very limited access. And some of them couldn't even get to school because of the distances between the villages. So they just needed bicycles. So the charity did lots of raising awareness around what was needed. And I think what was so lovely as well was the charity went house by house or hut by hut, village by village, to find out what each family needed. So some of them, education was a top priority. Some it was food, water, bicycles. It just depended. And the idea that was explained to us was that unless they can learn to speak and read and write English, they will always stay in that village. And that's absolutely fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfect. But if they wanted to have a chance and a way to get you know, some other options in their life,
fly off, you know,
just to have other options. And it was explained that it could potentially be a way out of poverty, becoming literate. And it's so functional as well. I think being able to read and write, you have to be able to, you know, read the information on a medicine bottle, for example. That's where it's very functional. Or read a stop sign when you're driving a car. So that's where literacy is, pretty vital.
On the wrong side,
so we dedicated, Neil, my husband, and I, we pretty much spent every night and every weekend for about 2 years actually creating the program. So we adapted the success of what happens here in the clinic to...
It's unbelievable what you guys created. I hope you guys can see that. It's unbelievable.
Thank you. Actually, Neil did say at the end, when we were literally like this, he said, you do realize we have created what a whole design team would create and a whole school would create, but it's just us two. And I was like, no wonder I've got long grey hair. So yeah, it was really special though. And to actually go out there. And so my colleagues went ahead of me, and then I went the second year, and to see the children, there were 100 children in this open, it was almost like a giant shed, I suppose. And they just stood up in the morning and they all put their hands together and they said, "Good morning, teacher." And it was the most emotional thing to think that they were speaking and they recognized all the sound cards and they all looked at me. And it was really, yeah, it was probably one of the most moving moments of my life, just to think about that. And I think the other really special part about that was that people traveled for 8 hours. Teachers from other parts of Cambodia had heard about the program and came down. And sometimes they didn't have the bus fare, which I think was about $6. And so we would pay for their bus fare so that they could actually come down, do the learning. We printed all the materials for them. They're beautiful resources, and take them back to their schools. So it's in 3 schools now. And I think the most moving part of all for me was one of the teachers that we were training there. He said, come to my school, come to my school. And we couldn't really understand. So we said, okay. And so after a few days, we went on this little tuk-tuk all the way through these fields, and his school, he'd set up under his house, he'd built little benches, and he was actually running a little school from under his house using the methods. And it was amazing to see all these children. Yeah, it's very, very moving.
That's so special. I feel like, Vicki, you got such a big heart, and it's amazing how expanded all the way to Cambodia. That's quite incredible.
Well, I think children are the same everywhere, and everyone deserves to be able to, you know, enjoy the power of literacy. And as you know,
already, I think it really is a powerful skill to have. You can go so far with it, and without it, you can be so lost.
No, and it's life-saving for some. I have a friend who said books saved me. You know, her whole life was very difficult, her family life. So she escaped into books, into the characters.
Interesting.
And through the characters, you learn about other worlds, you learn about empathy because you relate to those characters. Sometimes you miss the characters when you finish the book, you really feel for them. And, you know, it's such an education and an experience and an escape for some people. So it's very, I call it the power is in the pen.
Wow, that's a beautiful quote. Vicki, I've got another 2 more questions. Teaching in a creative way can really engage children, as we have seen. Do you think going forward the educational world can be more open and expand their ways from the traditional classroom teaching style to an environment that's more fun and engaging, just like you have designed?
Oh, that's a big question. I'm sure that it can be, but again, I think they have to think of it. It's almost like a design thinking challenge. So it's like, how do we go about what do we consider wrong? And then how can we change it? So I think small groups is always the way to go.
Are your resources open, your sound cards, and can people buy it off you, or how does it work? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do training, and I have online courses now. So I can talk a bit about those if you want. And that was that kind of came out of after we finished working in Cambodia, and we realized the power of taking this stuff around the world. Parents were also, the other thing that happened, just to backtrack a second, it's a little off topic. Parents were saying, you know, can I recommend my friend to come to your clinic, but they live interstate? I was like, oh, okay, maybe in the school holidays I can do it. And so I had this sort of high pressure intensive work that I did in the school holidays for children who lived further afield, who couldn't come regularly. And then other people started to get wind of the method and started to come from overseas. So it suddenly felt, again, like a high pressure on me to help this child in these given 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So my husband again said, look, we can actually sequence the method exactly how you teach in the sessions. We can sequence it, and we can do video instruction online. And so that's what we did. So we've created 2 online programs, one for pre-literacy, and that gets children's brains sort of primed and ready for school so that they can approach and arrive at school with all those foundation skills in place. And then the other one is the actual literacy program, which teaches them to read and write.
And this is all on your website if people wanted to have access to it?
Yes, this is on the website. There's both programs. And I also have a YouTube channel for parents to engage with their children just before they go to school. If they don't want the formalized program, there's lots of games and things that still stimulate those same pathways.
You've thought of everything, hey?
I don't know about everything, but certainly in terms of literacy, we've got that early stuff covered. So I think teachers have a really big job. It's very different being one-on-one with a parent and a child. I'm in a very, very unique position because I can tailor it exactly to that child, to their needs. I can notice and observe what they need and the exact moment that they need it. Whereas when you're a teacher, it's much harder because you've got to deliver a curriculum and you're in a classroom. So we're actually quite involved with some homeschooling families at the moment, and that's proving really interesting because it's that middle ground between sort of therapy one-on-one and schooling, but it's a bit more open, so you can actually structure it. I think maybe if we have this conversation again once we've seen how they homeschool, I think small classrooms is the way to go.
Is the way to go forward to,
and lots of movement breaks. Movement's important. I think sitting in rows and paper is never great. So
even as an adult, like to go to work from 9 to 5 to sit in front of a computer is not my style.
No, and I think
it's class. I think people.
I think
so. Sorry, you're saying, Vicki?
I was going to say, in that 9 to 5, that's just an arbitrary figure. We should work 8 hours a day, you know. But actually, when you look at the school curriculum, I think this is really interesting with the homeschoolers, you can actually complete the school curriculum in 3 months. So the amount of time, the academic learning time, is really interesting. I've had several children go through homeschooling, and then for the rest of the year, they're creative. They're doing project-based learning. I had one little boy who set up his own barista in his garage, aged 8, you know, and the girl went on to win like horse riding, big horse riding competition. She could dedicate her passion. So, you know, a lot of school is obviously, it's super important, but some of it is more of the social side of things and the structural side of things. But the actual learning, I think, could be done creatively. It just requires some good minds to put it together.
100%. Yeah, no, I like that. Thanks for sharing that. Vicki, what's your recipe for success in giving parents and teachers advice when teaching children?
Oh, recipe for success. So I would say, first and foremost, listen to the child. Really listen, and listen with care, and really acknowledge what they're saying and what they're doing, and watch them really carefully. Watch their little shoulders slump, because you can lift them up at that moment. Don't shatter their confidence. Be aware where their confidence lies and how easily shattered it is. And have a systematic method. So I think for me, the way that I've been able to be successful with particular families, maybe over other families, is have a really strong method, deliver it in a really fun way, and have the parent on board. Those would be my 3 kind of top, if I had to break it down. Yeah.
No. Wow, Vicki, thank you so much for all these wonderful life lessons, and for sharing us your 32 years of experience. And it's very inspiring that you've taught over like 4,000 children, or even more than that. And before you went off, I also just wanted to show.
I remember that. Oh my goodness.
This is meant to be some house that we colored together. So my dream was always to write a book. And I think when I was 9 years old, you helped me.
Oh, look at that.
You helped me write a little book of, when I was 9 years old at your clinic, with cursive writing.
That's right. I remember teaching you writing. How beautiful.
And you also were very good at drawing. I remember that. Let me see if I can get that on camera. I don't know if I can. but this will always be, very special to my heart. And I'm sure lots of other children have also created something similar. So Vicki, thank you so much for teaching me. I wouldn't be where I am today without you. And I can imagine a lot of all those children you have taught, they're probably, each of them are probably doing amazing out there and are achieving such great things because of someone believed for them at that age and taught them such fantastic skills. So Vicki, thank you so much for sharing with us today about the language tree and your amazing clinic and your amazing self and all your charity work.
Very kind, Tova. Thank you. It was really a treat to see that book. That took me back. No, it's a pleasure. It's really a dream come true to be able to contribute to children and their families, you know, and for lifelong skills and lifelong learning, which is what it's all about, in a really kind and caring environment and way. So, you know, it's been, I feel very, very blessed and privileged to have found my career. And I think just maybe on parting, you know, it might be nice for people to just think, you know, is this a job? Is this a career, or is this a calling? You know, that's kind of nice when you're weighing things up for your life. So it can be in any area. Yeah. So for me, it's a very natural calling. And I think, you know, even if I'm old and retired, I will still be assessing and diagnosing and helping and supporting, because I can't help myself. And so
yes, it's incredible. It really is incredible. So Vicki, I could keep saying thank you, but really, thank you so much for coming on this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are in the world.
We made it with all the technical hitches. It happened.
Amazing. We didn't think it will happen.
So lovely to talk to you, Tova, and so lovely to see what wonderful and inspiring work you're doing, connecting the education communities around the world. I mean, I think that's where it starts, you know. We have to have open dialogue, and we have to be respectful and listen to each other and stand on the shoulders of the great people that, you know, have gone before us, and people that have developed methods and systems, and know that anything is possible.
Can think of a more suitable role model than you for showing us that pathway. So thank you. And if people want to contact you, is that via your website?
That's probably the best place. I do have one link, but I have no idea how to connect links to things. So I can certainly send you all of that.
And send it to me, and then I'll post it when I send this video. Yeah.
In an email, I can explain all the different parts of the online program if people are further afield, if they don't live in Sydney. That's probably the best way. But I think the good thing about the online program is it is literally like having me in your home instructing you, except you can switch me off or you can replay me if something's not clear. You only need to go over it again. So it's kind of like I suppose it's the best of all my methods sequenced, so that I can give that gift to the world, and children can learn to read and write with ease, and they don't need to struggle. It's not necessary to struggle.
No, it's not.